Welcome to Quantum Mind Hub Stories. Before we dive in, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with friends. Remember to drop your thoughts, perspectives, and lessons learned in the comments section. Alright, get comfy, let's get started. Leah's day began with a tremor of unease as she sat at her kitchen table, staring into the steaming ceramic cup that had been a silent witness to her morning rituals for years. Today, however, the first sip of tea left her with an unsettling metallic aftertaste, a taste that wasn't there before. As the flavor burned on her tongue, a nagging thought began to unravel in her mind. Something was off. Leah's heart pounded in sync with the irregular rhythm of her thoughts. She recalled a subtle shift in her husband Daniel's demeanor over the past few weeks, a sweetness that felt forced, as if every kind word and gentle touch were calculated rather than sincere. Her mind raced through memories of their happier pasts and questioned whether this new behavior was a remedy for a secret burden or a well-disguised manipulation. With trembling hands, she placed the cup down, her eyes fixated on the chipped ceramic, once a symbol of familiarity now reeking of hidden danger. Outside, the city hummed with its typical morning buzz, yet inside, an almost imperceptible chill crept over the room. Leah felt as though she was on a precipice between a mundane reality and a dark twist of fate, a scene that played out like an emotional folktale. In that moment, with a mix of dread and determination, she resolved to uncover what was hidden behind the sweetness of her husband's new behavior. Her heart whispered that the answer lay not only in the taste of her tea but in the hidden layers of trust and deceit within her own home. Every sip now carried the weight of unspoken truths waiting to be revealed, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation with destiny itself. In the days that followed her unsettling sip, Leah couldn't help but notice the increasing sweetness in Daniel's demeanor, a sweetness that was as off-kilter as the taste in her tea. Each morning, he presented her with the same cup, now tainted by their shared routine. He would stand at her side with an overly eager smile and a sparkle in his eyes that felt rehearsed, as though he were performing a scripted role in a drama staged for her. Daniel's compliments, once heartfelt and spontaneous, now came in measured doses, leaving her both comforted and suspicious. "I just want you to feel cared for," he insisted repeatedly, his voice taut with an undertone that bypassed affection and hinted at a hidden motive. Yet, as much as his words attempted to soothe her doubts, Leah sensed a deeper, sinister orchestration behind every kind gesture. The odd consistency of his actions, the insistence on using the chipped ceramic mug despite her known dislike, the way he casually dismissed her concerns about minor mishaps, only deepened her suspicions. In quiet moments, as she watched Daniel prepare his own tea with meticulous precision, Leah's thoughts swirled. Was this a desperate attempt to shield her from some larger danger, or was it an elaborate ruse to control her mind and body? The urban hum of their bustling neighborhood contrasted sharply with the sterile calm of their home, where secrets seemed to permeate every corner. As she wandered through the small spaces of their living room and kitchen, she found herself piecing together subtle inconsistencies, a shadowed frown when she inquired about his routine, the anxious clink of utensils as if counting time. That gradually shaped a story of manipulation. Her internal alarm grew louder with every passing day, urging her to look beyond the veneer of domestic bliss to unearth the truth hidden behind daily rituals and forced smiles. The mirror, a silent chronicler of her daily life, became a harsh companion as Leah noticed that her reflection began to betray her. It wasn't just the fatigue that had started to etch lines on her face, there was an imperceptible shift, a distant look in her eyes, as if the person staring back was already surrendering to a creeping transformation. Every morning, as she reluctantly met her own gaze, there was an echo of unfamiliarity and dread. It was as if the very essence of who she once was being subtly rewritten by an unseen hand. Her neighbors' greetings, once warm and genuine, now felt like fragments of a distorted world where reality and illusion blurred together. The once familiar layout of her apartment morphed into an eerie stage for an unfolding drama where every misplaced object, every stray thought added to the growing tapestry of doubts. Leah found herself quietly questioning whether her lapses in memory, the forgotten names, the mislaid keys, were merely the product of modern exhaustion or symptoms of something more insidious. There was something deeply unnerving in the way her life was slipping through her fingers like tea that had cooled to an unrecognizable bitterness. In moments of solitude, she wondered if she was being slowly transformed into a mere puppet, her strings pulled by forces she couldn't name. Even her own heartbeat seemed to tick in synchrony with a hidden agenda crafted by someone else. While the urban skyline outside buzzed with the promise of another busy day within the walls of her home, every reflected gesture, every hesitant smile became a silent testament to a mystery that threatened to unravel everything she had ever known. It was the beginning of a psychological labyrinth, one where each misplaced memory was a clue in a dangerous puzzle. One chilly afternoon, the familiar chipped mug returned with a sinister twist. Daniel had picked it up with a careful deliberateness that belied its ordinary appearance. "This is your favorite, isn't it?" he had asked, his tone dipped in feigned affection, all the while forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. For Leah, the mug was no longer just an object of daily use. It had become a symbol of deception, a relic of routine now steeped in suspicion. She remembered how it had clattered off the counter one morning, the sound a discordant note in the otherwise harmonious melody of their life. Now, its presence was amplified by the nagging sense that every object in her home was orchestrated to keep her ensnared in a web of controlled memories. The chipped rim, once a quirky detail of their shared history, now echoed the fractured reality that she found herself trapped in. As she cradled the mug in her trembling hands, Leah's mind raced back to every small, overlooked detail. The way Daniel's eyes flickered ever so briefly when he believed she wasn't looking. The manner in which he almost apologetically insisted on its use, as if to fortify some hidden secret. With each forced sip of tea, the mug seemed to serve not only as a vessel for the mysterious blend that Daniel insisted on serving, but also as a metaphor for the way he had been serving her a daily dose of manipulation. In that moment, surrounded by the muted clatter of a suburban home and the distant hum of city life, Leah's senses were overwhelmed by the realization that every piece of their domestic life had been meticulously arranged. It wasn't about comfort or habit, it was about control, about rewriting her narrative one seemingly insignificant cup of tea at a time. The sense of betrayal cut deeper than any physical blow, igniting a fierce determination in her to search for the truth behind the orchestrated perfection of their life together. The arrival of Judith, Daniel's mother, added another layer of chilling complexity to an already unstable situation. As Judith stepped into their modest yet neatly kept apartment, an icy presence seemed to accompany her. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, swept over the interior with a familiarity that transcended simple maternal concern. For Leah, Judith had always embodied a force of overpowering authority. Someone whose approval was as crucial as it was demeaning. Now, Judith's unexpected return felt like the opening scene of a long-forgotten drama coming back to life. She didn't need to speak a word. Her mere presence was enough to rattle Leah's already fragile sense of stability. Judith's first steps were measured, almost predatory, as if she were reclaiming territory that was rightfully hers. Every movement was a calculated display of dominance, her gaze sharp and probing, reading Leah as though she were an open book filled with secrets. "I'm here to help," Judith intoned, her voice carrying the weight of generations and a familiar coldness that chilled Leah to the bone. But as Judith settled into the living room, making herself at home without any consideration for Leah's discomfort, it became clear that her role was far from benevolent. The subtle criticism in Judith's silence, the pointed gestures toward every detail of the home, reinforced a feeling that she was more akin to a guardian of old grudges than a loving relative. In the interplay of sharp exchanges and unspoken rebukes, Leah sensed that Judith wasn't simply a visitor, she was an instrument in a larger, more insidious plot. Amid the clattering hum of the city outside, Judith's presence cast long shadows of doubt and fear inside the room, hinting at painful memories and long-standing injustices that were as deeply rooted as the very foundations of their home. This confrontation with Judith was a stark reminder to Leah that the web of deception stretching around her life was woven by familiar hands, forcing her to confront not only Daniel's actions but also the legacy of control and manipulation that came from unexpected places. Nights turned into battlegrounds where dreams and reality collided as Leah found herself awakening in cold sweats, her heart thundering against a backdrop of muffled whispers emanating from the dark corners of her home. Sleep, once a sanctuary, had become a realm of nightmares and unbidden memories. In the dead of night, as the city's restless noises waned into a quiet despair, she would hear indistinct murmurs as if ghostly voices were whispering secrets in a language she almost understood. These nocturnal terrors left her questioning whether the source was internal, a reflection of her subconscious fears, or an external force working through the very fabric of her domesticated prison. The whispers often carried fragments of conversation, furtive exchanges about forgotten promises, lost identities, and acts of betrayal that reverberated with a sinister certainty. With the early morning light barely filtering through the drawn curtains, Leah would sit in the silent aftermath, piecing together the scattered remnants of her dreams like shards of broken teacups. The whispers, laden with urgency and melancholic regret, hinted at a past marred by secrets that were never truly laid to rest. Yet, amid the terror, there was also a seed of determination that began to germinate within her. She resolved to follow these mysterious threads, however faint, to uncover the full tapestry of truth woven by fate and deception. As the urban skyline slowly emerged from the twilight, Leah's resolve hardened. She knew that these nightly echoes were not just the lamentations of an overworked mind, but clues pointing towards a dark, meticulously concealed plot. Each whisper was a signpost, urging her to confront what lay hidden behind the veneer of everyday life, setting her on a collision course with destiny and the ultimate revelation of the forces that manipulated her reality. One ordinary morning turned extraordinary as Judith, in a moment that defied all expectations, mistakenly picked up Leah's cherished chipped cup, a cup that had become an emblem of fraught memories, and took a sip of the tea that was never meant for her consumption. Leah, standing silently in the doorway, watched with a mingled sense of dread and perverse curiosity as the unanticipated act unfolded. Rather than intervening, she allowed the scene to play out as if it were an essential part of the narrative she had been forced to inhabit. Judith's eyes, normally so steely and commanding, clouded over with a sudden disorientation. The transition was instantaneous. The measured steps turned into stumbling, the crisp tone of her voice dissolved into a confused murmur. Leah's heart pounded with both vindication and horror as she realized that this misfortune might be the key to unraveling the intricate design of deception laid out by Daniel. It was in that brief, disjointed moment, captured silently by a hidden camera that had been discreetly positioned to monitor even the most trivial domestic routines, that Leah glimpsed the tangible proof of the treachery swirling around her life. The air hung heavy with unspoken implications as she contemplated the significance of the accidental sip. Had Daniel orchestrated this slip of fate to display his control over every aspect of their lives? Or was it a genuine mistake that revealed vulnerabilities in his meticulously planned persona? In that charged instant, the chipped mug transformed from a simple vessel into a potent symbol of betrayal and vulnerability. As Judith's words slurred in confusion and she clutched the cup in a feeble attempt at composure, Leah's inner resolve began to crystallize. She realized that this mishap was not a random occurrence but a deliberate piece in the puzzle that would soon expose the full extent of Daniel's manipulations. The quiet domestic space, once filled only with the mundane clinks of everyday life, now served as the stage for an emerging drama where every sip of tea whispered secrets of treachery and every misplaced glance carried the weight of impending retribution. Mere minutes after that fateful sip, the atmosphere in the house shifted dramatically. Just 13 minutes later, as if adhering to a secret schedule, the effects of the mysterious tea took their toll on Judith. Her speech became slurred, and her once commanding grip on the armrest of the living room chair faltered drastically. The transformation was as shocking as it was methodical, creating a palpable tension that hovered over the space like a dark cloud. Leah observed with an acute sense of both dread and grim satisfaction as Judith's calm facade crumbled before her eyes. The subtle signs, first the slight stagger, then the quiet, almost imperceptible slump of her shoulders, coalesced into a horrifying demonstration of the tea's hidden potency. It was as if the very molecules of the mysterious beverage had been infused with a covert agent designed specifically to strip away the veneer of dignity and authority. In that moment, every second stretched out, amplifying the impact of the unfolding tragedy. Leah, caught between the instincts of self-preservation and a burning desire for justice, silently recorded every nuance of the scene. Her eyes flickered with determination behind the veil of worry, knowing that the unfolding disaster was a pivotal piece of evidence in unraveling the sinister plot woven by Daniel. The domestic setting, a modest apartment filled with all the comforting trappings of urban life, had been turned into a stage for a quiet coup that signaled the beginning of the end for the carefully constructed facade of Daniel's deceptive control. As Judith slumped further into the chair, her weakened state a stark contrast to the powerful persona she once projected. Leah's mind raced with the implications of this sudden collapse. The house, once a sanctuary of familiar routines, now brimmed with ominous signs of treachery and impending revelations that would soon upend everything. In an abrupt escalation of events, the shrill blare of sirens shattered the tension in the apartment as paramedics rushed through the door. Daniel's frantic shouts filled the room, intermingling with the somber tones of urgent commands from the emergency responders. Amid the chaos, Leah stood in a state of quiet detachment, absorbing every detail like a silent witness to an unfolding nightmare. The paramedics moved with clinical precision, swiftly attending to Judith, who lay slumped and vulnerable on the living room floor. Each movement, every whispered instruction, deepened the chasm between the reality Leah faced and the life she once knew. Daniel, caught in the throes of an emotion he could barely contain, oscillated between anger and sheer panic, his actions clashing with the calm determination that now emanated from Leah. Her face remained unreadable as she processed the shocking tableau, the fall of a once invincible figure now reduced by a treacherous sip of tea. In the background, the hidden nanny cam's silent recording served as an unnoticed guardian of evidence, capturing each poignant moment with relentless clarity. The juxtaposition of chaos and precision, of human vulnerability against the backdrop of an overbearing system of control, created a narrative that was as riveting as it was heartbreaking. As paramedics continued their frantic work, Leah's mind raced through the implications of what she had witnessed. Every passing second confirmed that this was not a random tragedy, but rather the deliberate unfolding of a carefully orchestrated scheme. The air grew thick with questions and silent accusations. In that unsettled moment, Leah vowed that she would follow every lead, expose every lie, and reclaim the life that had been so cruelly manipulated, starting with the truth hidden in that contaminated tea. Later that same evening, as a battered comm replaced the earlier tumult, Leah found solace in the glow of a discreet monitor that broadcasted footage from a hidden nanny cam strategically positioned in the living room. The notion that someone had been silently watching over even the smallest domestic details suddenly took on a profound significance. The grainy yet unmistakable images of Daniel meticulously preparing the tea, down to the precise moment he used a dropper to add an unknown substance, seared into her mind with an intensity that was both shocking and resolute. Every frame of the footage was a confession, capturing the clandestine ritual that had invaded her most private spaces. Leah sat, transfixed, her eyes scanning for details. The exact temperature of the tea, the specific time stamp marking the early hours of manipulated routine, and the subtle cues of body language that betrayed Daniel's careful calculation. In that moment, the camera, once merely a forgotten tool, became the sentinel of truth, a silent guardian that would ultimately hold Daniel accountable for the relentless deception that had poisoned her life. With trembling fingers, she replayed the sequence, each iteration reinforcing the chilling reality that this wasn't paranoia but a premeditated act of control executed day after day. The footage painted a grim picture of systematic manipulation where every act of domestic intimacy was tainted by an undercurrent of harm. Leah's resolve solidified as she stored the clip in a secret folder, labeling it with a single word that encapsulated her newfound purpose: insurance. It was a small act of defiance, one that spoke to the larger battle she was now determined to fight. Amid the quiet hum of her apartment and the distant murmur of the city beyond, Leah allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The truth was captured, and justice, though still on the horizon, felt like it was inching ever closer with every recorded frame of that fateful tea. With an insatiable need for certainty burning in her veins, Leah embarked on an exhaustive journey through the hidden archive of their everyday life. In the dim light of the study, she rewatched the footage that showed Daniel's every calculated move as he poured a mysterious liquid into her tea using a precise dropper. The timestamp etched on the video confirmed that this devious ritual had been executed every morning for the past month with chilling regularity. Absorbed the evidence, a maelstrom of emotions surged within her. A cocktail of disbelief, anger, and a steely determination that bordered on defiance. Each replay of the video was like peeling back another layer of a multifaceted lie that had been carefully maintained by the man she once loved. The monotonous routine of the recorded act was a silent testimony to a methodical strategy, one in which trust was slowly eroded day by day under the guise of affection and domestic normalcy. Leah's emotions swirled as she recalled past mornings, those seemingly insignificant rituals that now revealed themselves as orchestrated acts of betrayal. The clarity of the footage cut through any lingering doubts, marking a definitive moment of truth in a timeline otherwise blurred by denial and complacency. In that small study, among mementos of a life that was rapidly unraveling, Leah transformed from a passive victim into an avenger armed with irrefutable evidence. This hidden archive of compromised routines was not merely a record of deceit, it was the blueprint of her liberation. As she meticulously categorized and stored the damning files, the weight of the truth pressed upon her shoulders like the bricks of an old, crumbling building. Yet, with each digital file saved and every frame reviewed, Leah felt an empowering surge of resolve. The documented betrayal had become her strongest asset, a silent yet potent weapon in a war that was now being fought not with violence but with the power of undeniable truth. In a moment of calculated risk, Leah decided to take a step that would further solidify her arsenal against the web of deceit spun by Daniel. With trembling hands and a fiercely beating heart, she transferred a crucial clip from the nanny cam into a secret folder that she guarded as fiercely as her own life. She titled the file, Insurance. A single word that encapsulated her defiant stand against the systematic manipulation she had endured. The gesture was not merely archival, it was a symbolic reclaiming of the narrative that had been hijacked by years of covert control. In the quiet solitude of her bedroom, with the hum of the city filtering through half-closed curtains, Leah reviewed the footage once more. The images captured were incontrovertible, a daily ritual of betrayal meticulously executed, a deliberate act of poisoning that had been rendered routine. Every second of the clip was etched with the cold efficiency of a mastermind, leaving no room for ambiguity about Daniel's intentions. Her mind raced with questions. What would it take to confront him? Could she gather enough evidence to bring the hidden malice to light before it consumed her entirely? The recorded proof filled her with both dread and hope, a paradoxical mix of emotions that steeled her resolve. She could already envision the day when she would use this evidence not only to confront Daniel but also to seek justice in a system that had long turned a blind eye to quiet domestic tragedies. As she tucked the file away behind layers of password protection, Leah knew that her next moves would have to be as calculated as Daniel's daily concoctions. The weight of the secret, once an unbearable burden, was now a weapon in her hands. Each stored second of footage was a brick in the fortress of truth she was building, a truth that demanded to be heard even amid the noise of a chaotic, indifferent urban jungle. In the midst of her personal crusade, an unexpected confidant emerged in the form of Rosa, the family's longtime housekeeper. With a hesitant glance and trembling words, Rosa confided in Leah that she had often witnessed Daniel engaged in actions that were far beyond the mundane, secretive measurements in the pantry and furtive handling of a small bottle labeled cognition control. Over cups of modest herbal tea in the cramped back room of their suburban home, Rosa's voice was laden with a mixture of fear and helpless resignation. She recalled the peculiar behavior of Daniel. How he would meticulously measure out precise amounts of a mysterious liquid, his hands steady and sure despite the sinister nature of his actions. The details, though seemingly trivial on their own, coalesced into a portrait of a man meticulously orchestrating the control of his own household, a control that extended alarmingly into every facet of his interactions with Leah. Rosa's confession was delivered in a hushed tone, each word dripping with the weight of unspoken truths and decades of subdued complicity. The realization that Daniel had been covertly dosing not only the tea that Leah consumed but possibly every aspect of their domestic life sent tremors of disquiet through Leah. As the quiet of the afternoon deepened around them, the dialogue between the two women grew charged with urgency. Rosa's eyes pleaded for trust, while Leah's hardened gaze absorbed every detail as a shard of confirmation in the mosaic of betrayal she was painstakingly piecing together. The revelation of the label cognition control was a stark reminder that what Daniel was doing was not a spur-of-the-moment lapse in judgment. It was a calculated, systematic approach to subdue and dominate. In that intimate conversation, amid the worn wallpaper and murmurs of a tired household, Leah resolved that she would no longer allow the quiet tyranny that had seeped into every corner of her life to continue unchecked. Determined to uncover every fragment of the mystery, Leah turned to public records in search of clues to Daniel's dark past. Her investigation led her down a twisted path, one that revealed the grim fate of Daniel's first wife, a woman whose life had abruptly ended with a death ruled as a sleeping pill overdose. The similarities were too glaring to be mere coincidences: the same meticulous tea routine, the presence of that ill-fated chipped cup, and the haunting echoes of controlled consumption. In the sterile glow of a local archive room nestled in the heart of a bustling suburban district, Leah pored over documents that painted a morbid portrait of a life extinguished under suspicious circumstances. The records were dry and clinical in their language, yet each word resonated with a quiet horror that no one had expected to see in the everyday tapestry of their lives. As she sifted through the brittle pages, Leah began to form a picture of a man who seemed to repeat his modus operandi, a chilling pattern that pointed to premeditated acts of manipulation and control. Her pulse quickened as the dots connected, each link in the chain of evidence reinforcing the notion that Daniel's carefully crafted persona was nothing more than a facade to hide a much darker intent. The realization that the same fatal routine had been applied twice, a living nightmare for the first wife and a looming threat for Leah, cast a long, stark shadow over her every thought. In that silent, dim archive, amidst the echo of distant city sounds and the quiet shuffling of papers, Leah resolved that she could no longer remain a passive observer. The documents were not just relics of past tragedies, but the very evidence she would need to dismantle Daniel's web of deceit once and for all. With each new revelation piling upon the last, Leah's resolve to confront the sinister truth only grew stronger. Late one evening, while the urban night hummed softly outside her window, she found herself in possession of even more damning evidence. A locked drawer in Daniel's personal study that concealed a trove of medical documents, dosing charts, and the autopsy report of Maya Sinclair, the name of his first wife. The drawer had long been a forbidden realm in their home, one that had always sparked a vague sense of foreboding in Leah's heart. Determined to unearth its secrets, she fought through the trembling anxiety that gripped her hands until she finally managed to pry it open. Inside, neatly arranged and meticulously concealed, were pages that detailed every calculated step Daniel had taken to control those around him. The medical reports were as clinical as they were damning, outlining precise dosages, timelines, and effects that bore an eerie resemblance to the regimen he had imposed on her life. Each line of documentation was a cold reminder that his actions were not the erratic decisions of a troubled mind, but rather the deliberate strategies of a man with a dark agenda. The autopsy report, with its sparse language and grim facts, served as the incontrovertible confirmation of his previous sins. As Leah's eyes scanned over the pages, each word was imbued with a sense of betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound could. Her heart, already burdened with sorrow and regret, now surged with a burning determination for retribution. In that charged moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of neglected paperwork and the distant city nightlife, Leah realized that the key to dismantling Daniel's hold over her life was hidden in these documents. The evidence was irrefutable, a blueprint of his cruelty that would soon be used to expose him fully. And so, amid the clutter of forgotten secrets, Leah steeled herself for the turbulent path ahead, knowing that every revelation, every stolen piece of truth, was another step toward reclaiming her autonomy and seeking the justice she so desperately deserved. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Leah found solace and caution in the counsel of her best friend, Cassie. The two had weathered countless personal storms together, yet nothing had prepared them for the vicious intricacies of the situation now unfolding. Over whispered late-night phone calls filled with desperation and determination, Cassie urged Leah to go to the authorities with the amassed evidence. "You need to show them everything, Leah," Cassie insisted, her voice a blend of fierce loyalty and raw fear. "This isn't just about one man, it's about reclaiming your life, piece by piece." However, Cassie also warned of the real dangers lurking within their small, interconnected community where Daniel's influence permeated deeply. The weight of her friend's words, combined with the damning evidence of systematic poisoning and manipulation, left Leah in a state of limbo. The idea of involving the police filled her with both hope and terror. Could the system, so steeped in its own bureaucracy and complicity, truly deliver the justice she sought? Despite her uncertainties, the resolve in Cassie's voice resonated deeply. Leah knew that to remain silent was to allow further erosion of the person she once was. Encouraged by Cassie's unwavering support, she began to draft a plan, a meticulous strategy that combined her newly discovered evidence with a step-by-step account of her life under Daniel's control. Late nights turned into early mornings as Leah compiled files, recorded voice memos, and rewatched every piece of footage with a singular focus on one goal: liberation. In those solitary hours, as the urban skyline blushed with the first hints of dawn, she allowed herself a brief, hopeful smile. The path ahead was treacherous, woven with risks and uncertainties, but it was also paved with the promise of reclaiming her autonomy. Cassie's encouragement was the spark that transformed Leah's simmering fear into a burning determination, a determination to see justice done, not only for herself but also for the countless silent victims of Daniel's calculated cruelty. In that resolute moment, amid the echo of supportive voices and the relentless ticking of time, Leah steeled herself to confront her past and redefine her future. The next morning, the fragile calm was shattered by the unexpected reawakening of Judith, who had regained consciousness under mysterious circumstances. Judith's reappearance was a shock not only in terms of physical presence but also in the murky haze of confusion that enveloped her mind. When she awoke, her eyes darted about, struggling to piece together the fragments of a night that had been far more disorienting than any memory of familial conflict before. Her voice, barely a whisper, mumbled incoherent words that painted a picture of events too foggy to comprehend fully. Leah found herself torn between a complex cocktail of empathy and the cold satisfaction of knowing that the mysterious drug had been as effective on Judith as it had been intended on the others. With a mixture of caution and resolve, Leah approached Judith, now painfully aware that the same methodical poisoning could render even the most authoritative figures helpless. "What happened?" Judith demanded, her tone laced with confusion and a hint of accusation. But the drug's lingering effects left her memories fragmented, like pieces of an intricate puzzle that refused to align neatly. Leah listened, her heart pounding as she pieced together the faint, disjointed narratives. The drug had not only taken hold of the body, but had also fractured the mind, leaving behind an unsettling void where trust and clarity once resided. It was in that moment that Leah realized the true extent of Daniel's cruelty. He had created an environment where no one could be sure of their own recollections. The sight of Judith's broken expression, combined with the raw, lingering effects of the drug, ignited an even fiercer determination in Leah. This was no longer just about her survival. It was about dismantling an entire system of manipulation that rendered even the most resilient minds vulnerable. With a silent promise to herself and a steely resolve burning in her eyes, Leah vowed to protect not only her own narrative but also those who had been unwittingly ensnared in Daniel's web of control. Every broken memory, every struggle for clarity, was now a spark in the fire of her quest for justice. A quest that would not rest until every secret was brought into the harsh light of truth. As days turned into a relentless sequence of heightened tension and barely concealed suspicion, Daniel's behavior began to shift in alarming ways. His once meticulously controlled acts of manipulation morphed into a growing paranoia that bordered on desperation. He started watching Leah with an intensity that was both unnerving and accusatory, his eyes tracking her movements with a predator's precision. Every conversation they shared, every fleeting exchange of glances across their modest living space, became laden with an unspoken challenge, a battle of wits that left Leah feeling constantly exposed. At dinner, during what was meant to be a peaceful family meal, Daniel's tone carried a disconcerting mix of suspicion and accusatory overtones. "Why are you always so quiet, Leah?" he would ask in a voice that trembled between feigned affection and genuine fear, as though he sensed that the carefully constructed fortress of his control was beginning to crumble. Yet, beneath the surface of these interrogations, his body language betrayed a deeper terror, that the carefully woven tapestry of lies was on the brink of unraveling. Leah, now armed with undeniable evidence and a renewed sense of purpose, maintained a facade of calm while internally orchestrating her next moves with methodical precision. Her responses were measured, her voice carrying an undercurrent of quiet defiance. Every question Daniel hurled was met with the steady resolve of someone who had finally glimpsed the truth. The air in the apartment grew heavy with tension, the once comforting hum of domestic life replaced by an incessant, almost palpable wariness. In that charged atmosphere, each moment felt as though it were a battleground, a contest of power where the stakes were nothing less than freedom. As Daniel's paranoia increased, so too did Leah's determination to seize control of her own destiny. The shifting dynamics between them were a stark reminder that while one man had orchestrated an elaborate scheme of control, the will to reclaim one's life could be a force more potent than the darkest of manipulations. Amid the chaos of suspicion and shifting power dynamics, Leah stumbled upon a handwritten note that would serve as a crucial piece in the puzzle of Daniel's nefarious plan. Scribbled in his unmistakable handwriting, the note read, 2 drops max. Any more equals symptoms. The simplicity of the message was juxtaposed starkly against the severe implications it carried, a cold, methodical warning that underpinned every sip of the tea that had so subtly altered the course of her life. Reading those words sent a chill down Leah's spine as they confirmed that every small detail of her daily routine had been calculated to ensure a precise and deliberate control over her bodily responses. It wasn't a random occurrence, nor was it the result of an accidental contamination. The message was deliberate, a stark illustration of how Daniel had transformed their everyday interactions into carefully measured, cruel experiments in manipulation. With the weight of this revelation pressing down on her, Leah took a deep, steadying breath and steadied herself for what would come next. In that single, brief moment of clarity, she realized that the note was not only a document of control but also the key to unraveling the hidden depths of Daniel's motivation. It revealed a level of premeditation that was as precise as it was terrifying, confirming that her life had been subjected to a calculated regimen designed to erode her autonomy bit by bit. This newfound understanding electrified her determination, shifting the balance of power irreversibly. Leah clutched the note as though it were both a symbol of betrayal and a catalyst for retribution. In the silence that followed, punctuated only by the steady hum of the city beyond their walls, she silently vowed to turn Daniel's own methods against him, a promise that every meticulously planned act of control would ultimately be his undoing. In the quiet solitude of her bedroom, Leah stood before the mirror, a silent audience to her internal transformation as she began rehearsing the confrontation that loomed on the horizon. Every gesture, every quivering attempt to steady her trembling hands was a rehearsal for a war that she felt compelled to fight. The reflection staring back was a mingling of determination, fear, and a profound sense of loss for the life that had been so ruthlessly manipulated. "I will not be your puppet," she whispered to herself, her voice echoing off the faded wallpaper like a solemn vow. Each practice run was a meticulous dance of resolve and vulnerability as she mentally prepared for the moment when the facade would finally break. The mirror became an unyielding confidant, absorbing each tear-streaked determination and every faltering word of defiance. In that reflective glass, she saw not just her own face, but the countless moments of betrayal, heartbreak, and injustice that had culminated in this singular drive for liberation. The act of rehearsing was cathartic, a means to confront the overwhelming powerlessness she had once felt and to transform it into a weapon of self-affirmation. Every look, every practiced retort, was a step toward reclaiming the autonomy that had been eroded by years of manipulation. The looming confrontation wasn't just a personal vendetta. It was an epic battle for justice in a world that had long rewarded deceit and control. As Leah practiced in front of the mirror, the weight of her determination suffused every fiber of her being. In that private arena, she was both warrior and victim, ready to expose the dark undercurrents of betrayal that had defined her existence. The ritual of preparation was her promise to herself that the day would come when every calculated lie would be laid bare, and her voice would resonate with the strength of 1,000 silenced truths. The tension in their household escalated further as Daniel unexpectedly arranged a formal dinner, inviting a group of influential acquaintances to their modest suburban home. Leah watched from a quiet corner as Dan, IEL moved with a blend of calculated charm and subtle menace, carefully preparing the tea for his guests as if every detail was a performance meant to hide the darker truths behind the mundane. The living room, adorned with carefully chosen art and dim ambient lighting, transformed into a stage where every gesture was scrutinized. Daniel's behavior was a sharp juxtaposition to the simmering truth that Leah had been piecing together in secret. The guests, oblivious to the murky undercurrents swirling beneath the surface, sipped their drinks and engaged in lighthearted banter, all while an undercurrent of tension permeated the air. Leah, though outwardly composed, absorbed every detail, the way Daniel's hand trembled just slightly while pouring the tea, the discreet glance he threw her way that hinted at shared, unspoken knowledge. The sumptuous table setting, with its meticulous arrangement of fine china and polished silverware, served as an ironic canvas for the unfolding drama. Every clink and whisper was amplified, as if the very walls of the room were silently bearing witness to the impending unraveling of a carefully constructed illusion. In that charged atmosphere, Leah felt as though she were part of an elaborate play in which the costumes were neatly ironed and the roles pre-assigned, even as the reality behind the facade threatened to burst forth in a torrent of truth. It was a moment filled with electric anticipation, a delicate balance of decorum and the unspoken acknowledgement that every sip of tea was imbued with secrets and silent rebellion. The dinner, designed to project an image of normalcy and control, was the final act in a drama that had been months in the making. As Leah watched the scene unfold, she silently vowed that no charming smile or refined gesture would ultimately obscure the dark intentions behind every carefully measured drop of tea. With a resolve tempered by months of suppressed fear and accumulating evidence, Leah finally decided that the time had come for her to take a decisive step. Late in the evening, when the decorum of the formal dinner had long faded into the quiet solitude of the night, she enacted a daring move that would upend Daniel's carefully constructed world. In a moment calculated for maximum impact, Leah discreetly switched the carefully dosed tea with a freshly brewed cup meant solely for Daniel. The exchange was subtle, a quiet, almost imperceptible act of rebellion executed with the precision of someone who had spent long nights perfecting her plan. As she carried out the switch, her heart pounded with an intensity that resonated with every suppressed tear and every silent scream of betrayal. The rhythmic ticking of the wall clock became her metronome, each second intensifying the significance of her clandestine act. Daniel, caught in the throes of his own self-assured routine, remained oblivious to the quiet coup taking place right under his nose. When he finally raised the cup to his lips, time itself seemed to slow down. The room, though filled with the hushed murmurs of after-dinner conversations, was now a stage set for the unraveling of a carefully maintained illusion. Leah's pulse raced as she watched him drink, knowing that this simple sip had the potential to expose the dark truth behind their every interaction. In that single, audacious moment of defiance, everything shifted. Leah's meticulous planning and quiet determination had transformed into a silent, personal rebellion, one that promised to flip the tables on a man who had for so long manipulated every facet of their lives. The evening, once marked by social niceties and forced smiles, had now become the battleground for a war of truth, where even the simplest act of switching a cup could ignite an irreversible chain of events. As the alcohol and the fading remnants of the formal dinner gave way to a hushed stillness, the turning point of Daniel's carefully maintained facade began to manifest. With the new cup of tea in his hands, a tea that was no longer laced with the hidden poison, the first subtle signs of his unraveling emerged. At first, there was a perplexing pause as he took a measured sip, and then his eyes, which had long been trained to hide any hint of vulnerability, started to dart around in an almost panicked rhythm. For a brief moment, the confident mask he had worn so well began to crack, revealing a glimmer of uncharacteristic fear that struck Leah to the core. In that instant, every suppressed emotion and every painstaking detail of the past months merged into a singular point of reckoning. The realization that the man who had orchestrated a life of twisted control was now losing his grip sent a surge of empowerment coursing through her veins. The subtle twitch of his jaw, the quickened pace of his heartbeat, even the slight quiver in his usually controlled voice, all these signs were the harbingers of an inevitable downfall. The room, once filled with the polite clinking of cutlery and convivial chatter, now resonated with the quiet rumble of impending truth. Leah's eyes, filled with both relief and anticipation, never left him. Every nuance of his reaction was meticulously noted, each one adding to the overwhelming evidence that his reign of manipulation was nearing its end. In that charged moment, it wasn't just Daniel who was exposed, it was the entire insidious system of control he had perpetrated. The unfolding vulnerability was a powerful vindication for Leah, reinforcing her resolve to see every lie and every clandestine act of cruelty laid bare. In the silent spaces between breaths, as Daniel continued to drink and struggle against a rising tide of panic, Leah felt a surge of liberation. The reckoning was in full swing, and the taste of truth was far sweeter than any concoction of deceit. It was an irreversible moment, a silent declaration that she would no longer be complicit in her own undoing. The ripple of change reached a crescendo as the sharp knock on the door signaled the arrival of Detective Reyes, a figure who carried with him the weight of legal authority and the promise of untangling the web of deception that had so long gripped Leah's life. The detective's presence was both unexpected and precisely timed, emerging as the embodiment of accountability in a narrative that had been steeped in quiet tyranny for far too long. With the warrant clutched in his firm hand, Detective Reyes stepped into the living room with a confident stride, his eyes sweeping over the scene with a practiced detachment that belied the gravity of what he was about to uncover. The tension in the room was palpable. Every guest and every subtle piece of evidence coalesced into a single moment of truth. Leah, who had so carefully orchestrated her silent rebellion, now felt the weight of vindication. She knew that this was the moment when her carefully amassed evidence, from the clandestine nanny cam footage to the incriminating documents hidden in Daniel's drawer, would finally be used to dismantle the facade of control that had poisoned her life. Detective Reyes, brief and unsentimental, questioned Daniel with a firmness that cut through the layers of deceit. His presence was a stark reminder that while darkness may cloak secrets for a time, the light of justice was inexorable. In that charged atmosphere, every whispered word, every exchanged glance, carried the silent promise of retribution. Leah could feel the tide of fate shifting irrevocably as the detective's questions grew sharper and his gaze more penetrating. The intervention wasn't just about legal repercussions. It was about reclaiming a life that had been shadowed by manipulation and pain. As the night deepened, the scene unfolded like the final act of a long-concealed drama, where the hidden truths of a secret life were finally forced into the light. And in that pivotal moment, Detective Reyes's arrival signified not just an end to one man's reign of control, but the hopeful beginning of a long-awaited reckoning. The din of after-dinner conversations died down to a stunned silence as Daniel was abruptly hauled away in handcuffs, his once commanding presence reduced to a shadow of panic and disbelief. In the midst of the unfolding chaos, Daniel's shocked exclamation, "You set me up!" reverberated across the room. A final, desperate accusation hurled into the void. For Leah, that moment was the culmination of months of hidden torment and silent resistance. Her carefully recorded evidence, her stolen glances at a world steeped in deceit, had culminated in the day when the truth could no longer be contained within the walls of their home. As Daniel was led out by officers, the guests who had once been unwitting participants in his theatrical charade stood in muted disbelief. Leah, maintaining an air of calm despite the whirlwind of emotions boiling inside her, locked eyes with him one last time. There was no grand declaration of victory in that instant, only a steady, icy resolve that spoke volumes. In that silent exchange, the complexities of their twisted relationship were distilled into a single, potent moment. Daniel had served the tea of deception, and in turn, he had been ensnared by the very web he had spun. The room filled with an electric stillness, a mixture of shock, relief, and the unspoken understanding that a new chapter was about to begin. Leah's internal monologue surged with vindication as she watched him being taken away, each step echoing the downfall of a man who had underestimated the quiet strength of a determined soul. In that powerful moment, the deception was laid bare for all to see. The quiet justice that had been waiting like a tightly coiled spring was finally released. And as the officers closed the door behind Daniel, the truth, long suppressed and meticulously documented, began to radiate outward, promising that every act of betrayal would soon be met with its inevitable retribution. The courtroom buzzed with a subdued tension as Leah, now transformed from a silent observer into an assertive witness, took the stand. The proceedings were a surreal blend of stark legal realities and deeply personal revelations. Maya's family, whose grief had once been shrouded in quiet sorrow, now testified with an unwavering intensity that resonated with every person in the room. Their words painted a vivid picture of a troubled past, a tapestry of hidden dangers and calculated manipulations that stretched far beyond the confines of private space. Leah's video evidence, streaming on every screen in the courtroom, left little doubt about Daniel's calculated cruelty. Every frame of his daily ritual, every meticulously recorded detail of his surreptitious actions was laid bare before a skeptical audience now converted into a forum for truth. The prosecution's case was bolstered by a steadfast narrative of premeditated manipulation, a narrative that struck at the heart of betrayal and the exploitation of trust in the very intimacy of marriage. As the judge's gavel finally fell, sealing Daniel's fate with a verdict of guilt on all counts, the room seemed to exhale collectively. It was a moment not only of personal vindication for Leah but also of cathartic justice for all who had ever been vulnerable to similar betrayals. The public broadcast of the trial turned the courtroom into a stage, the unfolding drama rippling out into the digital world and sparking conversations far beyond the sterile walls of justice. The viral nature of the footage and the subsequent media frenzy underscored the universal themes of betrayal, survival, and the indomitable human spirit. In that decisive moment, Leah knew that the echoes of truth would resonate long after the day was done, forever serving as a powerful reminder that even the darkest secrets could not escape the light of accountability. In the quiet aftermath of the trial, when the roar of justice began to settle into a reflective silence, Judith, Daniel's once formidable mother, returned to Leah's doorstep. The air was thick with unspoken tension as Judith, eyes downcast and voice trembling with regret, demanded answers. "How could you have known?" she asked, her tone a blend of accusation and desperate sorrow that resonated with the wounded echoes of the past. Judith's breakdown was not just a moment of personal vulnerability, it was a symbolic reckoning for the legacy of control and manipulation that had plagued their family for generations. Leah, her emotions still raw from the pain and betrayal she had endured, found herself torn between empathy and the need for retribution. The conversation unfolded like a melancholic confession where every whispered regret and tearful apology laid bare a history steeped in ruthless ambition and unspoken torment. In that fraught encounter, Leah recounted the painstaking journey that had led her to this point, from the insidious daily rituals to the explosive unraveling of a controlled life. Her voice, though steady, carried the weight of every silent cry and every desperate attempt to reclaim her identity. It was not an easy conversation, it was a confrontation with the past, a demand for accountability, and a moment of painful clarity. Judith's own vulnerability, long hidden behind a facade of stern authority, now bubbled to the surface, challenging the very foundation of the oppressive legacy she had once embodied. As the two women faced each other, the air between them was charged with the bitter tang of memory and regret. In that raw, unfiltered moment of truth, Leah's voice rose, not in anger but with an assertive clarity that left no room for misunderstanding. "You raised him differently," she declared softly, "but I survived him." In that poignant exchange, the full measure of betrayal and survival was laid bare, a testament to the resilience of a spirit that refused to be conquered by the sins of the past. The day of reckoning finally culminated in the delivery of a long-awaited verdict that sealed Daniel's fate, a guilty on all counts of attempted murder, premeditation, and evidence tampering. The courtroom, once a battleground of conflicting emotions and legal machinations, transformed into a solemn arena where justice was not only pronounced but fiercely celebrated. Leah sat among the small group of onlookers, feeling a complex blend of relief and sorrow as the final words echoed through the space. It was as though the verdict had not only condemned Daniel but also exorcised the dark memories that had haunted every corner of her troubled home. Each word from the judge's gavel, measured and resolute, was a step away from the labyrinth of deception that had once ensnared her. The public outcry, magnified by the viral spread of the court's proceedings, resonated far beyond the sterile walls of the tribunal, igniting a broader conversation on domestic control and the hidden scars of betrayal. For Leah, the verdict was a personal vindication, a signal that the silent suffering and countless compromises had not been in vain. It was an affirmation that truth, however buried beneath layers of manipulation, would always find a way to burst forth into the light. In that defining moment, justice was not just a legal decision but a transformative experience, a catharsis that promised new beginnings for those who had long suffered in silence. The finality of the judgment was a potent reminder that, despite the shadows of the past, the pursuit of truth could never be permanently silenced. And as the courtroom slowly emptied, the enduring power of resilience and retribution left an indelible mark on everyone present, a mark that would inspire countless others to challenge the forces of darkness wherever they resided. In the aftermath of the trial and the irrevocable shattering of an oppressive past, Leah embraced a new dawn with tentative hope and determined resolve. With Daniel's shadow now permanently cast aside, she stepped into a modest apartment nestled within a vibrant urban neighborhood, one that promised both anonymity and the opportunity for a fresh start. The new space, with its bare walls and open windows welcoming the bright morning light, symbolized everything that Leah had yearned for: freedom, rebirth, and the possibility of reclaiming her true self. As she carefully unpacked small personal items, a faded photograph, a cherished mug that held no trace of betrayal, and a plant whose resilient green leaves mirrored her own spirit, she allowed herself to savor the quiet joy of independence. In the gentle hum of her new surroundings, where the chaos of past manipulations was replaced by the simple rhythms of everyday life, Leah found the courage to believe that healing was possible. The fresh breath of liberated air, mingled with the distant sounds of a bustling yet welcoming city, stirred a profound optimism within her. In every deliberate move, whether it was carefully arranging her new living space or choosing a new blend of tea without any hidden surprises, Leah was writing the first lines of a personal renaissance. The walls around her, once laden with the echoes of secrets and deceit, now bore the promise of honest beginnings and untold possibilities. With each passing hour, as the weight of former torments slowly lifted, Leah grew ever more confident in her ability to embrace life on her own terms. The symbolic act of moving home was more than a change of address. It was a bold, irrevocable statement of self-liberation. It was in this humble refuge that she would find the strength to rebuild her world, to reconnect with the parts of herself long suppressed by betrayal and fear. In that serene moment of renewal, Leah whispered a quiet promise to herself: to live fully, to cherish every genuine moment, and to never again allow the shadows of the past to dim the light of her own future. Finally, the long and arduous journey of betrayal, heartbreak, and eventual liberation reached its emotionally charged conclusion as Leah sat alone in her new home, savoring a simple cup of tea that was now free of any hidden dangers. With deliberate calm, she stirred the tea slowly, savoring its pure aroma, a blend of lemon and honey that symbolized both the bitter past and the promise of a sweet future. The journey had been marked by shocking betrayals, calculated manipulations, and the heavy price of reclaiming her life. Each struggle, each tear shed in moments of quiet defiance, had paved the way for a triumphant reawakening. In the peaceful solitude of her freshly minted sanctuary, Leah allowed herself a moment of reflective serenity, a moment to acknowledge the resilience that had carried her through the darkest of days. The taste of the tea was now a testament to freedom and the reclamation of identity, its simplicity resonating with an authenticity that she had longed for. With her eyes fixed on the gentle ripple of warmth in the cup, Leah silently vowed never to allow anyone else to dictate the terms of her existence. The quiet victory over decades of control had finally been won, and in that pristine instant, she understood that the power of truth would always prevail over deceit. As her story reached its poignant climax, the legacy of her struggle shone as a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever suffered in silence. To all those watching her journey unfold on screen, Leah offered a heartfelt invitation. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends, and leave a comment with your thoughts and the lessons you've learned. Let this story be a reminder that even in the face of relentless betrayal, the truth can set you free and justice will always find a way.